Hello and welcome. I am Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching India Today Global. We are starting this bulletin with the renewed bonhomie of India and United States on the trade issues. After India-U.S. trade deal, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is on diplomatic overdrive in Washington D.C. In back-to-back high-level meetings, he met U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. These meetings are aimed at fast-tracking the operational details of the trade pact. He also participated in the Critical Minerals Ministerial Meeting convened by Mr. Rubio. The discussions during these meetings spanned around trade, energy, nuclear cooperation, defense, critical minerals, and emerging technologies. This signals a full push to convert the trade deal into a ground reality. And even U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who was once a critic, has also hailed the deal as a good example of how things can change. Trump's aide claimed that India will now buy less Russian oil. He described the move as evidence that economic pressure on Russia's trading partners could influence the course of conflict. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jaishankar Graham categorically stated that India has protection around its agriculture products, but Washington would continue to push for greater access to parts of India's protected agriculture sector.
140 crore Indians are celebrating a trade deal which is under final stages of detailing between the negotiating teams of both countries. We will be shortly issuing a joint statement by both countries. I can assure 140 crore brothers and sisters that this is a deal that will make every Indian proud, that will protect the interest of every Indian and provide huge opportunities for all the people of India and will protect the sensitive sectors, the interests of our agriculture and our dairy sectors.
A very good relationship. India committed to not only no longer purchasing Russian oil, but buying oil from the United States, also perhaps from Venezuela too, which we know will now have a direct benefit on the United States and the American people. And in addition to that, Prime Minister Modi committed to $500 billion of investments into the United States, including for transportation, for energy, and for agricultural products as well. So this is another great trade deal.
And amid all the concerns and questions regarding the agri-sector of India, Union Agriculture Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan, in an exclusive interview to India Today, has reiterated Prime Minister Narendra Modi's promise, his commitment that interest of farmers will be protected. Let's listen to what Mr. Shivraj Singh Chauhan had to say.
मोदी जी ने कहा था मैं देश नहीं झुकने दूंगा, कभी देश झुकने नहीं दिया। मोदी जी ने कहा था कितना भी नुकसान हो जाए लेकिन किसानों के हित पे आंच नहीं आने दूंगा, आंच नहीं आने दी। हमने मुख्य अनाज, डेयरी उत्पाद, हमारे प्रमुख फल सबको सुरक्षित रखा है। ऐसा कोई बाजार नहीं खुल रहा जिसमें हमारे किसानों का अहित हो, नुकसान हो। उल्टे मैं ये कहना चाहता हूं, टैरिफ घटने से अब हम चावल का निर्यात करते हैं, चावल के भंडार भरे हैं, चावल का सबसे बड़ा उत्पादक देश है भारत। 63,000 करोड़ रुपए का चावल पिछले साल हमने निर्यात किया। अब टैरिफ घटने से हमारा बासमती हो, बाकी चावल हो, उसको नया बाजार मिलेगा, हमारे मसाले निर्यात होंगे, टेक्सटाइल का निर्यात बढ़ेगा तो किसानों को ही फायदा है, कपास उत्पादक किसानों को फायदा होगा। अब कोई देश ये थोड़ी कहेगा कि हमें घाटा हुआ है, वो अगर कहेंगे तो उनकी बात कहेंगे, लेकिन मैं फिर कह रहा हूं, जिम्मेदारी से कह रहा हूं, भारत का कृषि मंत्री कह रहा है, प्रधानमंत्री जी को धन्यवाद, किसानों के हित पूरी तरह से सुरक्षित रखे गए।
So you heard Union Agriculture Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan clearly saying that the agriculture sector of India remains protected after the India-U.S. trade deal. However, U.S. has also expressed their willingness to participate in a greater partnership with India, and also they would keep seeking access to India's agri market. Why agriculture is such an important sector for India? Because many people are dependent on for their livelihood on this very sector. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave a categorical promise that he will do everything to protect the livelihoods of people, those who are involved in the agriculture, in the farming sector, in the shrimps and in the maritime produce sector. And now, to discuss the various other aspects of the India-US trade deal, what is there for the Indian farmers, what is there for the Indian manufacturers in this deal, I am being joined by Mukesh Aghi, President and CEO of the India-US Strategic Partnership Forum from Washington, D.C. So welcome to India Today.
Thank you.
Mr. Aghi, first of all, congratulations for this exciting announcement, because I know that you and US ISPF also played their bit in the making of this deal. So can you briefly tell us what inspired the push for this India-US trade deal and how it all came together?
Well, you have to understand that the US is the largest trading partner of India, for almost $200 billion trade between the two countries. And if you look at the services aspect, that's much, much bigger. And to have a 50% tariff for India, which was curtailing the Indian exports into the US, specifically in the low-end garments, gems and jewelries and others. And that's impacting not only the GDP, but also the employment in India. I think by bringing down the tariff from 50% to 18%, it sends a message that India is important to the US, and for India, US is also important because the tariff on China is around 34%. The effort
Absolutely, sir. This gives Indian products
parties
and Indian manufacturers a great advantage, an edge in the US market. But how do you think this will shake things up for everyday businessmen, you know, for the layman of India? If you can help us understand that how it is going to expand the Indian products in US markets.
Well, I think they were curtailed by the 50% tariff. The garment guys were struggling. The gem and jewelry guys were struggling. By bringing down to 18%, it is going to basically make them much more competitive in the US market. And you will see the buyers moving to Indian product because product coming from China has 34% tariff. Product coming from Bangladesh has 20% tariff. A product coming from other Asian countries are higher than 18%. So it does make Indian goods much more competitive. And then with the rupee devaluating by 6% or 7%, that adds to the competitiveness of Indian goods.
So, do you think that there are still some loose ends in this thing? And if there are some issues, do we have a robust mechanism in place to navigate those differences?
No, absolutely. I think India's Commerce Ministry has done a stellar job trying to manage this, and they're working very closely with the USTR in the US. So there is a mechanism, and there are still a few things which are open, and I think both sides are working to close them. But overall, it's a tremendous win for India. So I have to compliment.
Mr. Aghi, hold for a while. We are getting a breaking news here, because US President Donald Trump has spoken to Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Trump hails his talks with Chinese President, and Trump hails it and called it an excellent conversation with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And Trump said that he also spoke about the issue of Taiwan, on tariff, on trade, and he discussed many other issues. And President Donald Trump also expressed that he is looking forward to his China trip in April. So this is a big announcement coming from the US President Donald Trump. And Mr. Aghi is with us. Mr. Aghi, how do you see this conversation as? We know that US and China are competitor for the influence in the global market, for the geopolitics and for the geoeconomics. But how do you see this conversation? Do we see a collaboration, a partnership here, or there is a stern message from White House to Beijing?
Well, the sentiment in the US is that China is the main competition. And it is the biggest challenge for the US. It's China which has basically taken and stolen a lot of IP from the US. And that's where I think India becomes critical, because India is one country which sees China as a threat, and China has never treated India as an equal partner. So from that perspective, I think the alignment between India and the United States to deal with a very aggressive, assertive China. So yes, the conversations take place, and you need to talk to everybody to ensure that you don't go into conflict. But we do see in every aspect in the U.S. that China will keep on pushing U.S. in every aspect. In fact, when you look at a couple of months ago, it stopped the critical mineral supply to U.S. and U.S. has to basically back down from that perspective. So we do see China as a challenge, not only for the U.S. but also for India.
So quickly, would you say the better sense prevailed in Washington, D.C., that now India and United States are on the same page?
No, absolutely. I think you have to understand in the long term, tariffs do damages to both countries, to the consumer also. And by lowering the tariff, I think it sends a message that it's not just about trade between the two countries, it's also geopolitical. It's also on the technology side, it's on the defense side, it's on the people to people. These two countries have a lot to do together. And by lowering the temperature and the tariff, you will see a much more a greater momentum taking place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aghi, for sharing these thoughts and your perspective on India-U.S. trade deal and a promising pact between India and the United States. But moving on, the same breath, about the economic prospect and how world see India as a lucrative and a promising destination. Iconic fashion brand Hugo Boss CEO speaks exclusively to India Today on how India is emerging as a key growth market. Listen to how Hugo Boss see India as a key growth market amid global slowdown.
Tell us about this entire repositioning, particularly with regards to the Indian markets, because we are an Indian channel.
Yes, thank you for having me, by the way. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here and talk about Hugo Boss. We had basically a new strategy, or we put a new strategy in place that's 4.5 years ago. It's called Claim 5. And with Claim 5, we transitioned the whole company. First, we had to refresh the brand because we lost some relevance. We have repositioned and refreshed the product because we were known only as a suit brand. And we actually transformed the brand into a 24/7 lifestyle brand for men and for women. Without losing, of course, the suit business. And then we did, also on omni-channel. We had retail and we had wholesale, but we combined it as omni-channel because you have to be omnipresent. We digitalized the whole company, and we had to put a new culture in place that is based on trust. So this transformation has happened from the US to Europe to Asia and, of course, into India, which we see big potential. I think the market, not only in terms of production, but of point of sales. I mean, shopping centers are opening. The economy is quite, customer sentiment is good in India, whereas the rest of the world, it's under pressure. But India, today we have roughly 15 stores, and we want to double those stores in the next 2 to 3 years. And we see in India, the brand is well received for men and for women. And just that you understand, Hugo Boss is a platform. We said Hugo Boss is not a brand, Hugo Boss is a platform. And on that platform are 2 brands. One is Boss for millennials, and that says everybody can be a boss as long as you do something, as long as you stand for something. Doesn't matter if man or woman. Hugo is more like the younger brand. You go your own way. It's more rebellious, and for the
so
more
Hugo is essentially you go.
Yes.
Oh.
That's how that's the story behind it.
Oh, that's actually quite interesting.
So not only big corporations or big economies, but even the small island nations are looking at India with prospects and hope. The Premier of British Virgin Island at the World Government Summit in Dubai spoke to my colleague Geeta Mohan about how doing business with India is important for even their country. Let's listen to this conversation.
How is the government, or how's the British Virgin Islands, how are you looking at restructuring, or are you looking at restructuring at all?
Well, certainly we've built a very strong economy over the years, not just reliant on tourism and traditional sectors like agriculture and fisheries. But we have a very strong financial center in the Virgin Islands. We have about 370 plus companies registered in the Virgin Islands. We're extremely impressed with what's happening here in the United Arab Emirates, the way that you've used this investment not just to generate wealth, but a sustainable type of living, making sure that persons have good health care, good education, access to quality homes. And this is something that we would like to replicate in the Virgin Islands and in the wider region. But of course, we want to diversify our markets. We want more business coming from the Middle East, from India, etc. We are going on a big trade mission later this year to India, to ASEAN, and of course, tourism continues to be very strong, but we also want to diversify our markets in tourism. Of course, we rely heavily on the United States of America. Soon we'll be extending our airport runway, and we hope to facilitate long-haul flights that would facilitate persons coming from places like the Middle East.
While announcing the new trade pact with India, US President Donald Trump claimed that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has agreed to stop buying Russian oil and purchase more from the United States in exchange for reduction of tariffs. India, on the other hand, remains silent on this issue. The ground reality of India's energy ties has a complex geopolitics in the heart of it. Here is a report explaining the entire matter in further detail.
India's energy ties are back in the global spotlight, this time at the center of a sweeping new trade agreement with the United States. Washington claims New Delhi has committed to walking away from Russian crude oil in a move that helped unlock sharply lower tariffs on Indian exports. But the data, the timelines, and the geopolitics tell a more complex story. On Monday, US President Donald Trump announced a landmark trade deal with India, cutting tariffs on Indian goods to 18% from 50%. Those tariffs had included a 25% punitive levy tied directly to India's continued purchases of Russian crude oil. According to President Trump, Prime Minister Narendra Modi assured him that India would stop buying Russian crude and instead shift toward energy imports from the United States and potentially Venezuela.
India committed to not only no longer purchasing Russian oil, but buying oil from the United States, also perhaps from Venezuela too, which we know will now have a direct benefit on the United States and the American people.
Interestingly, India has maintained official silence on the issue, with no public confirmation or denial from officials or ministers on any commitment to completely halt purchases of Russian crude oil. But on ground and in the markets, India's energy shift is proving to be more gradual than absolute. According to data from global trade analytics firm Kepler, India's crude oil imports from Russia have declined but not disappeared, and there seems to be little possibility of a complete shift anytime soon. Russian crude made up 38% of India's crude oil imports in November. By January, that share had fallen to 22%, even as India's overall oil imports rose. In volume terms, Russian imports dropped to about 1.16 million barrels per day, their lowest level in nearly 3 years. Kepler adds that India's energy dependence on Russia is unlikely to reduce anytime soon. Russian crude oil supplies for the next 8 to 10 weeks are largely secured, with cargo deals finalized. Even realists in the US realize this.
There could be some problems down the line. For example, if President Trump, is expecting India to cut off the Russian oil imports completely by a certain time, and India maybe has a different understanding.
The reason India cannot wean away immediately is simple: energy security and economics. Russian crude, particularly Urals, remains discounted and well suited to India's complex refining system. A rapid disengagement, experts warn, would be commercially difficult and politically sensitive. Moscow is already pushing back on Washington's narrative. On Tuesday, Kremlin said that Russia had not heard any statement from India about stopping oil purchases, stressing on the fact that Russia would continue developing ties with India in every possible way. So what comes next? Kepler says while the trade deal is unlikely to cut Russian oil volumes in the near term, it may reshape marginal flows. US crude is emerging as the biggest beneficiary and may rise to 10% of India's oil imports, replacing not Russian oil but West African grades. Venezuelan crude may return in limited opportunistic volumes but not as a long-term alternative. Bureau Report, Business Today TV.
And we are getting a breaking news that former US President Bill Clinton and former First Lady and former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is set to testify before Congress on February 26. So Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton both are going to testify before the US Congress. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton will testify on 26th of February and followed by former US President Bill Clinton regarding the probe on Epstein-related ties that were never fully explained. And recently, US Department of Justice has released over 3 million documents, including over 2,000 images and 1,500 videos pertaining to the black world of Jeffrey Epstein. This issue is bringing the political storm in the United States, and now the former US President Bill Clinton is set to testify before the US Congress to explain his position, and also former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is going to testify before the US Congress. So we have to see because the Monica Lewinsky case, the infamous case which actually brought Bill Clinton down from his office, he was almost at the verge of impeachment, and former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's entire tenure was also marred by the controversies around Bill Clinton's tenure in office and other issues. And moving on, let's talk about the timeline of social media. Spain plans to ban social media targeting minors under 16, calling it a shield against the digital Wild West. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez made the announcement at the World Government Summit in Dubai on February 3rd, 2026. Let's break down the major policy shift.
Spain's socialist government will introduce a bill next week in Parliament to block children under 16 from social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and X. Social media websites will have to ensure a robust age verification process. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who announced the move at the World Government Summit in Dubai on Tuesday, slammed social media for flouting laws and ignoring crimes. He said the new rules will hold executives liable for hate speech and illegal content. Algorithm manipulation to boost harm will become a crime.
Spain will ban access to social media for minors under the age of 16.
The political class in Spain is divided. Conservative opposition supports the ban, but the far-right Vox blasts it as censorship. Elon Musk, who owns X, has hit out at Sanchez, calling him a tyrant and a traitor to the people of Spain. Using an explicit insult like Dirty Sanchez with a poop emoji, he labeled Sanchez as a true fascist totalitarian on X. While the move seems to have upset teenagers in Spain, parents welcome the proposed ban.
I honestly think I'm a little against it, because even though there are many bad things about social media, there are also good things. And I think it's more of a decision for parents than for the government. I think it's fine. Yes, it's a good measure to encourage children to play with each other and not to be on their mobile phones, which I think is terrible, to be honest.
Well, I don't generally like prohibitions, but I understand that this measure is necessary.
The ban, drafted with the help of UNICEF experts, could deactivate 7 lakh teen accounts in Spain. Australia had announced a similar ban in December to curb grooming, cyberbullying, porn exposure and addiction. While the United Kingdom and France are also considering similar age-based restrictions. Bureau Report, India Today.